Today, we're digging into the anatomy of an accusation. We're going to deconstruct the argument from a viral video about a recent assassination attempt, and we're going to see exactly how its narrative gets built piece by piece.
So what's at the core of this whole thing? It really boils down to this one single claim. The entire argument is designed to convince you of this idea, that one side of the political aisle has a violence problem it just refuses to deal with.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. We'll start with that central accusation. Then we'll see how the assailant is profiled. After that, we'll dive into the source's take on the official reactions, check out the staged theory it talks about, and finally, look at the so-called fallout.
Okay, let's kick things off with that core argument. This is really the foundation for everything else we're about to see.
Now, for this entire argument to work, you really have to buy into one key idea first, and that's this concept of rhetorical responsibility. The thinking here is that what political leaders say isn't just, talk. It's potent. It can be the spark that actually leads to real-world violence.
And this is where the source makes its big move. It argues this whole thing wasn't just some random, isolated act. No way. The video frames it as the inevitable result of all that heated rhetoric coming from certain politicians and the media.
So once that idea is in place, what's next? Well, the source video then starts to build a very, very specific profile of the shooter. The whole point is to tie him directly to one political party.
And look at how they do it. It's like a checklist, right? Political donations, what he said online, protests he went to, stuff from his manifesto. Every single one of these points is being used as a piece of evidence, all to paint a crystal clear picture of his political identity for anyone watching.
All right, so the shooter's been profiled. Now the video pivots. It starts looking at what prominent political figures were saying right after it happened, and the video's interpretation, that these statements were basically just ways to dodge the real issue.
This is a really interesting technique the source uses. See how it takes an official statement, in this case from Barack Obama, and puts it right up against its own facts? The message they're sending is pretty clear. How can you say we don't know the motive? There's a manifesto. It's meant to make the official statement sound, disingenuous.
And it's not just one person. The video does this with other leaders too. For example, it takes Hakeem Jeffries' comments and frames them as a strategic move. The source claims that by bringing up January 6th and calling Republicans extremists, he was basically changing the subject to shift the blame.
And this quote from the video really sums up their whole point here. The argument is that there's this pattern, right? Denial and deflection. That one side just won't look at its own problems, and instead just points the finger back at the other guys.
Okay, so this is where the argument takes a really interesting twist. The source video actually brings up a totally different theory that was floating around, this idea that the whole thing was a setup, that it was staged.
And the video actually asks this question directly. It doesn't just wave the theory away, it tries to explain why people would believe it, and of course, that explanation fits right into its main argument. So what's the answer it gives?
Well, according to the source video, calling it staged is a kind of psychological out. It's an escape hatch. The idea is, hey, if it wasn't even real, then nobody has to face that tough question, did our side's rhetoric cause this? It's all presented as a way to dodge responsibility.
And that brings us to the final piece, the supposed fallout. The video doesn't just end with the event itself, it argues that this was a massive tipping point and that we're already seeing huge political consequences play out because of it. This is probably the biggest claim in the whole video. It says that millions of people are literally leaving the Democratic Party right now. That there's this mass exodus happening, all because they want to get away from what the video calls a violent movement.
So, how do they back up a claim like millions of people are leaving? Well, the video uses personal stories, like this clip from someone else. This kind of anecdotal evidence is used to give you a window into the mind of someone who's supposedly switching sides because of all this.
Then, to really drive the point home, the source pulls in this post from a very public figure. This quote is all about raising the stakes, right? It's trying to frame the attempt not as a one-off event, but as a terrifying glimpse of what could happen if that political party ever gets back into power. It's a pretty stark warning.
So when you put it all together, it leaves us with a really big question. What we've just looked at is a perfect case study of how the act of one single person can get sucked into this massive political war. And in that war, rhetoric becomes the main weapon, used to pin the blame not just on the person who did it, but on an entire group of millions.